Hey guys, so I was learning Photoshop a lot and I was learning CS5. When this was a few Photoshops back, it went to CS5, CS6, and now it's Creative Cloud where you can't even buy CS5. I remember buying CS5, it was the whole Photoshop and it wasn't the monthly subscription, which could run you a lot because you actually have to pay and pay and pay, you never own it. But it does have updates and things like that. So this is how I learned Photoshop. Photoshop, as you can see, you buy it, you want to learn it, but then these are the books that you get in the bookstore about how to learn Photoshop. And as you can see, these are huge, thick books with a lot of information. I mean, a lot of information. There is no way you're gonna read this book and then know everything that you read in this book. You're never gonna understand, you're never gonna read this book and really understand it. My suggestion for learning Photoshop is here's the more complicated book and here's the simpler book. It's thinner and it's understanding Adobe Photoshop, the essential techniques. This is what you need. You need the essential techniques. You don't need to learn Photoshop on demand. You don't need to learn everything that it does. Just start with what you're gonna use it for. I was using it for art. I was using it to draw. So I used the paint tool and maybe a few of the other tools that are kind of fancy. But I basically used the paintbrush on an empty field, and then you learn how to play with colors and do stuff like that. So that's basically what I had to learn, the paintbrush tool, the eraser tool, how to open up a new page and how to use levels and how to use layers and stuff like that. So that's basically only a few things, but a book like this will go into depth about everything. So don't go ahead and read everything about Photoshop. You're never gonna learn everything Photoshop does. And even if you read everything it does, it's just you're never gonna use all of the things that it does. It's easier to fly a space shuttle than it is to learn Photoshop. If someone put you in the pilot seat of a space shuttle, you would figure that out. And then they would put somebody else on a computer with Photoshop and go ahead, figure out Photoshop. You would figure out that space shuttle faster than the guy would ever figure out Photoshop. It is impossible. It's not intuitive. You don't really understand what everything does because of the way it's worded. They don't really use words everyone can understand. They use keywords that you can only understand if you know what the keyword does. So what's good about these books here? This is okay because it's on demand. So what this is teaching you is for example, whatever you need to learn, whatever you need to know, you can just flip through the book. You flip through the book and then you go ahead and you can read about how to use that one feature. The only thing is when you're new with Photoshop, you don't know what the features are. So you're gonna wanna flip through the whole book and go, okay, there's a feature for that, there's a feature for that. For example, look, the thing about this one, the good thing about it is, say this one here, it says, use the clone stamp tool, okay? So you learn how to use the clone stamp tool. The thing is, when you're new to Photoshop, you don't know what a clone stamp tool does or what it is, because they use words like clone stamp tool. You have to learn what the word means and what the tool actually does. Right? But where it comes down and explains it, it's okay because it kind of has a 7-step explanation of what you do and what you kind of use it for. So that's one thing. So for example, the next page is using dodge and burn tools. Dodge and burn make things lighter or darker. But if you don't know that, you're not going to know the words dodge and burn. So they don't really use English. They don't use easy to understand words. They should make they should actually explain what dodge and burn is. They should say using dodge and burn tools to make things lighter and darker. For example, use the clone stamp tool to whatever it does, because I don't use the clone stamp tool. but it kind of like fills in an area, and I just never use it, so I'm not even familiar with it. But like, for example, here's another one, adjusting bristle brush tips. You see, Photoshop does so much stuff that it takes textbooks to explain everything it does. But the nice thing about Photoshop is you don't need to learn all of the things that it does to do what you want to do with it. You can pretty much learn 10 to 20 single things that you actually need Photoshop to do for you. So if you're drawing in Photoshop, you might want to need to learn the brushes or maybe the eraser. You need to learn the layers. You need to learn a few things like how to, for example, you have to learn like how to draw with Photoshop, how to maybe edit photographs with Photoshop. See, the Photoshop does so much that you need to know exactly what you're going to use it for. So people that like edit photos with Photoshop don't actually draw with it. They don't make paintings with Photoshop, but they do a lot of photo editing with Photoshop, and they use it for a completely different purpose, and they will need to learn it in a different way. And this is also why it's so hard to learn Photoshop, because if you need it for one way, you have to learn how to use it for that way only. Like, you have to find a teacher or someone putting up a video or whatever it is about how to use Photoshop for that thing. So when you're searching how to use Photoshop, you have to do how to use Photoshop for what you want to do it with. So for example, if you want to draw with Photoshop, you have to like search how to use Photoshop for drawing. Or if you want to do photo editing with Photoshop, how to use Photoshop for photo editing. How to use the text, how to use Photoshop for writing text, and then it tells you how to do the text and write text in Photoshop. So that's the thing. But it's good where it explains it simply. One page has the explanation, but what's hard about this is that it's not in English. It tells you things like using the quick mask tool. And what's interesting, it does explain next to it what the quick mask tool is, but you kind of have to like read the whole thing, and it does take time to do that. And the thing is, you have to read a whole thing here just to know if that's something you're ever going to use. And the thing is, each of these pages has a thing that explains working in the filter gallery, right? And then explains what that is. So like, you will never like remember everything that this does. So books like this, while it's good if you know what you're looking for, because this is CS5 on demand, if you actually know what you're looking for, if you, like for example, if you know you want to learn how to use the clone stamp tool, go ahead and look it up and it explains it. But a book like this is way more than you'll ever need to start. You don't need, like, this is okay once you've started using it. You understand like how to use it, you understand basically how it's laid out, you understand like what all the different icons are and all the different things and what they mean. So something like this is simpler, and basically, even though it is kind of complicated, it's a lot thinner. It's like a third of that book. It's thinner. It's also something that says essentials. So it's not going to tell you like these expanded things. You might want to learn those later on, but you don't need that to start. You need essentials, right? So it's going to explain like, it's going to start off with like, it's still going to be really complicated, but like, for example, it's got like adjustments, masks. It's got like, there's just like too many things that it has to explain, color, swatches, it's just so complicated. But like, for example, like for drawing or something, you do need to learn color, and you might want to learn swatches, because this is how to choose the color that you're going to draw with. So you do need to learn color, but when you're new to Photoshop, you don't really know that you need to learn color. But certain things you actually don't need to know, like adjustments, you don't need to know that right away. Masks, you don't need to know that right away. You just need to know the basic things, so you can get started, and you could know exactly how you're going to how you're going to use everything. You don't need to know like things like histogram. You don't need to know info. You don't need to know styles, navigator. You don't really need to know any of this stuff. But what's interesting is you can kind of like flip around in this book. It's really simpler. And for example, you catch this and it says resize an image. Now that is English, okay? Resize an image is in English. It is, it is something where it's obvious you're gonna resize. You wanna make the image bigger, you're gonna make the image smaller. And it does, and it explains, there's a little box there. You type in the number and it basically makes the image bigger and smaller. Like creating like color channels and stuff like that. You don't need to know this right away. Eyedropper tool. But what this does do though, it's a huge amount like simpler. It basically takes everything that's in that book, like instead of reading 3 pages about maybe non-relevant stuff, you're reading 1 page about more relevant stuff. So go into the smaller, the easiest ones you can get, like the simpler, like, Photoshop for the beginner, like that's never used or even heard of Photoshop before. And it'll explain like how to use these. These are way, way better. So like, even when it says things like gradient map, it explains what a gradient map is. Even though it says something called photo filter, obviously it changes the way the photo looks. It's speaking English, like, and it does come with, this book did come with a disc, which I don't know where the disc is, but it came with a disc, which is good. Here is another one, using the type tool, and the type, obviously that's the text thing like that. So I do recommend this book a lot more. Filter gallery, and it shows you how using filters on photographs changes it up. This is a lot of a better book. I would recommend checking out like Understanding Adobe Photoshop CS5 Essential Techniques. This is okay. It's a simpler book. It's not like huge. It's only 281 pages or something like that. And it's got a lot of relevant stuff. Blur and sharpen tools. These are like really things like with photographs. You might, you read this and it's obvious that yes, this is something that makes the picture blurry or not blurry. It's still hard to pick up. It's still hard to understand, but when things are like really simple with pictures and it shows you like what to do with it. There's something about the pen tool, which I still haven't used yet, but it is relevant. You should learn how to use the pen tool. Like, for example, here we go, like drawing shapes. Okay, there's a thing about drawing shapes, and obviously drawing shapes is about drawing shapes. It's not going to be called clone stamp tool, which nobody knows what that is, what it's for. It takes a lot, like you're not learning to be like a Photoshop, designer or something like that. You don't really need to know it on like a scientific level or like a high mathematical level when you're first starting. So for example, like a thing like this where it says tinting a photo is a lot easier to understand what they're doing with that. So they show you tinting a photo, they show you the actual photo they're tinting, and it shows you that there's a little adjustment screen and you can play around with like moving the little thing left and right, and it changes the photo, the color of the photo, and it tinting the photo, it makes it all different. So check out things that are really simple like this, and you can do certain things like aspect ratio, explains what that is. And what's nice is that that's already inside the book, but when the book starts off, it starts off with like really simple things. Like acquiring digital images, how to get it from a digital camera, just real simple things. And when it does explain something, it just says it very simply, and it doesn't really like go into anything too much. Also like things that you might want to know, like free restore, free transform command, little things like that. And it doesn't really for example, like when it explains something, it just tells you right away, like wand tools. That's the explanation. That's it. That's as far as they go into it. You know, obviously, all you need to really know is what it is and how to play around with it, and you could see kind of like what it does. Okay, quick selection tools, selections, and then you can kind of play around with the stuff and what it is. This is really cool. Like you can like open the page here, you can see where it says brush tool, what to like, you know, what thing to bring up and to actually, you know, do a brush tool, you know, what thing to and how to like mess around with it and change it around and stuff like that. So, you know, check out the simpler books on Adobe Photoshop. It's really good to learn Adobe Photoshop. Like you can use it just for yourself or professionally. But when you do it, I would really strongly like not recommend the big textbooks that explain it. You can go to your bookshop and check out like the really simple essentials to explain Adobe Photoshop. It'll tell you everything that's in there, and these are all very, very accurate. And if you look at it and it looks like it's explaining everything really, really quickly, like check it out. It's probably the best way to learn Adobe Photoshop. So if you guys like my video, please subscribe and hit the like button. And I have other videos about different stuff. And yeah, so if you guys have any questions or like if you have any comments, just like leave it in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in another video. Take care, and like here's to Photoshop. Here's to learning it.